All right, let's begin. Who would like to start? Name, sobriety date, and how many years?
Theresa, indicate which one so we don't talk over each other.
Okay, that'll be better. All right, how about let's start with Ralph.
My name is Ralph White. I'm an alcoholic, and my sobriety date is October 11th, 1986. I'm 35 years sober.
Thank you. I'll go by the squares I see. Reggie?
Reggie White, alcoholic, sobriety date June 24, 2017, 4 years sober.
Sweet. Rod? I have to unmute. I love it. Rod is new to Zoom, you guys. This is his first time on
Reggie,
Zoom.
help you.
And I'm so glad he's here.
Reggie, go help him.
There he is. Look at brother coming in. In the meantime, Ronnie, you want to give us your sobriety date?
Sure. I want you guys to watch Reggie when he walked back. I think he's barefooted. My name is Ronald White. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is July the 14th of 1986. I'm 35 years sober.
Okay.
Click on.
We got it.
There he is.
Okay. My name is Rod. I'm an alcoholic. And my sobriety date is Christmas Day of 1987. That's 34 years.
Nice. And so, see, Ronnie gave us a distraction to look at Reggie with his phone, so that we didn't have to give you that much in the spotlight. So let's begin with your sobrieties. First, let's talk a little bit about that before we get into the family dynamic. So with the time that you shared, it looks like, want me to call you Ronald or Ronnie? When you came into the recovery, came in first. You were the first one to get sober. Is that correct?
The first one to stay sober. Ralph was the first person to go to a program.
Okay.
And so that's how I knew about programs. I didn't even know anything about any kind of program or recovery until Ralph did something. I won't tell his story, his part of that story, but there's a series of overlapping relapses. and I just happened to be the last one to come and stay. I should say the first one to come and stay, but Ralph was the first one to go in the first place.
Nice. So Ralph, tell us about that. Since from the family, obviously we have some family members who are drinking and using. What introduced you to the program of recovery? Where did you hear it from and from whom?
Well, we all got loaded. Yes, you see 4 of us, there's 6 of us, and we were all getting loaded at the same time. And we circled the drain pretty much from about 80, started about 84-ish. Before then, actually, but really started circling the drain, all of us, around that time. And we all ended up pretty much staying at my mom's house. And I was married and I was separate. I was living in my mind, got put out of my house. And on a Friday, my ex-wife, Mary, came by my mom's house and I thought to pick up some money from a check because I was still working. And she didn't come to pick up money, which I didn't have. She told me, Ralph, this friend of mine, who she was working at a radio station, KDAC, and the other manager had gone into treatment. She said, Greg went into treatment. If you want to go in this program, my insurance will pay. And I didn't really want to go, but I was so embarrassed about not having money. Just called me at the right time and didn't wait. I got in the car with nothing. And we went to Cedar Sinai. That was August of 1985. And I went up in there, didn't know anything about anything. I had been in spots, book calls them sordid places. I had been in places where they had shotguns. Me and Ronnie were in this spot where the door had been blown off. And I just figured, oh, police been here. They not coming back. So I'm comfortable in there. And when I walked up into that cedar cyanide treatment for the first time, you guys, I had not been so scared, and I don't know how long. I've been in spots. Me and Ronnie were in a spot one night, and the door opened, and we were getting ready to leave, and a knife just came in the door, and we fell back. And two dudes came in looking for his girl and beat this girl almost to death. Wouldn't let us leave. Me and Ronnie, it was crazy, but I was scared walking in the treatment, scared to death. But that's how it happened. I hadn't heard anything about it before, but my then ex-wife, came over and said her insurance would pay if I would go get some help. And I went and I stayed 90 days and relapsed on day 89. The program was a 30-day program, but 90 days in the sobriety, I relapsed. Ronnie had subsequently gone in, and I thought this will be the first time both of us are sober at the same time. He was taking a pass from this place he went in. And when he came home on the pass, I was laying in the bed with the flu, right? Had relapsed, didn't want to tell anybody. And was,
Now, so you went in, and then Ronnie, what was it? You saw your brother, who's the oldest?
me.
Okay. You saw your older brother, you were kind of like at the edge of your bottom as well. You guys kind of reached the bottom, all of you were at the bottom at the same time. And you saw him go in there and said, let me do what he's doing. What ended up having you decide too, especially around the same time?
It's such a trip, Theresa, because it's really hard for me sometimes to recreate a lot of the events that happened before I finally got sober, especially in those during that time, because that's when it really got bad. Right? When was it that Mama had her nervous breakdown? Because it was in 85.
But when Ronnie went in this time, he didn't go to stay. The time you're talking about, Theresa, he didn't go to stay that time.
Hey, let me tell that part. Let me tell it. Because
this is still 84.
No,
this is 85. This is 85.
And I don't get sober to stay until July of 86. So right. I go into the spot. Ralph goes to Cedar Sinai. Now, I knew he had gone somewhere to get some help, and I had gotten bad. And I need to let you know that when I first was going into treatment, I thought that I was going to be able to go to learn how to manage getting loaded and being able to live, be able to work, still get loaded. I just needed to be able to slow down. I needed, as the big book said, I wanted to become a moderate drinker, right? I wanted to be able to learn how to control it. It wasn't even any thought in my mind of stopping. So I go to this place. I don't have insurance like Ralph. I've been practicing as an attorney, but by now I don't have no regular job. I had worked for the Olympic Committee in 1984 and on a relapse, me and Ralph. Well, first I embezzled some money from the Olympic Committee. I think the statute of limitations is run on that. So I embezzled money from the Olympic Committee. They thought that we hadn't gotten checks, and we filled out affidavits saying, and I had gotten my check, and I fill out an affidavit saying I didn't. So I get the money and I go on a run. It was on this run that me and Ralph steal my brother Ricky, who's not on the screen. We steal our brother Ricky's SSI check, because all the checks came in the name of R. White.
R. White.
And we're all R. White. So I'm on a run, right? But we get to 85, and by now, I guess what I'm sharing with it had gotten bad. I don't have insurance like Ralph. And so I have to just I forget how I found this place, but it was a place on the cusp of Long Beach and Compton called the Main Artery. Now, this is a program that was for Native Americans. I know I may look swarthy. I may look like, but I'm not. I'm not. I'm not a Native American, Theresa. I know. So, but anyway, but they let you go in anyway. It's not just for that. So I go there because you can go free, and that was my introduction to sobriety. Was going into the main artery. That's when I had a series of relapses that I can talk about later. I don't want to take up a lot of time right now, but know this: I relapsed twice through the main artery, going on passes. First, Ralph said it was the first pass I went on when I saw him loaded. No, I gone on a pass even before then and relapsed and didn't tell nobody, because I went into the treatment center, told them I was a lawyer and I had one more case to finish. Right. And I did. And so they let me on a special pass. You were supposed to be restricted for 30 days. They let me go out on a special pass after being there for 1 week. And I went out and I forgot that my client paid me in let's say he didn't pay in cash. He paid in product. Right. And so that was a relapse. And I snuck back into the facility. And they had elected me the president of the AA in the facility after being there for a week. We didn't have any outside people. It was the inmates running the asylum. So I, as the president of the AA, I had the treasury. So I stole that. You know, you get the picture. My first experience with sobriety was not pretty.
So, which is now, Rod, you've got around the same amount of time. When did you come in? Out of this dynamic?
I believe I came in 1986.
No.
I came in 86. No, was the first time
No.
I was kind of like introduced.
87.
No, he
87.
gonna
No,
he gonna talk.
86.
He
Wait
gonna
a
talk
second,
about when he
that's
first
funny.
got introduced,
He
and
doesn't know
then
when he got introduced.
86, because I've gone through like, man, 4 or 5
right.
different programs, which were, and I never stayed over 2-3 weeks, you know, and I would come back to the neighborhood. I would always find it necessary to tell them I have some mail, something important came up. I'm hurting, I need to go to the doctor. It was something in each one of these programs that was just itching to go back to the neighborhood, because my brothers knew how much I loved the block that I lived on. So, you know, I had several friends on the block that I lived on. So I would find different reasons to. But, you know, and it's a trip, because you know, listening to my brothers, I get a little foggy, because that's some years back. That's years. So I remember really before I went into programs, I came home on a run, off of a run, and I believe it was either Reggie or Ralph. And when I came home, they knew how bad I wanted some money. So of course, they're like, if you go to this meeting with me, I'll give you $5.
I gave you
And that's
$5.
before I even went to any program. It was either Ralph or Reggie.
Me,
Or
And,
both.
it took you to
Apparently it
96.
was both.
Right.
Oh,
It took
look, you
me to
just found out that you
9604.
got $10.
No, I think it was $5. Yeah, $5, which was like $100. So at any rate, you know, I went to that meeting, man, and I remember going to that meeting in 9604, first time I went.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
man, it was the worst meeting I ever gone to in my life. I had to sit there for an hour and a half, and my brother was smart enough to not give me the $5 until the meeting was over, because I wouldn't have stayed. And I was so upset after the meeting, having to stay there, that I wanted to walk home. I didn't even ride home. I was upset, and I just, you know, I took that $5, man, and I just like, it was like $100 to me. So I was gone, and I was gone for a couple of weeks. And I remember coming back home, man, and looking for looking for them because I knew that they were doing something that I needed, because we all got loaded together. So I was looking for them to get some help. Take me back up there. Just take me back up to the meeting. I'm not asking for any money. I just want, I needed some help. That's when I knew I needed help. You know, one of them took me back up to the meet and introduced me to this guy that looked like Rick James. Name was Malcolm.
Malcolm.
Yeah, yeah, and he was able to take me to a program, the first program, and from that
And then what-
program, yeah,
And then
that program that was like 86.
No, no,
87.
right, watch, we
No.
gonna tell you.
So wait, hold
Ask
on one
Reggie.
second. Hold on one second, because this is gonna be one of my next questions. So Reggie, what about you? You came in, though you have 4 years, you came in before. So,
I came in February of '87.
okay, and it was on the tail of who? And who attracted you or gave you the idea to go into recovery?
the streets. That's what it was, the fact that I didn't want to take this girl's car back. I had left Rod and my brother, my oldest brother, at this girl's house in the valley. And I had taken the car to go cop in LA, and I just didn't make it back with the car. So I'm riding around and I'm getting credit and I'm, re-copping, all the stuff you do. And I tried to reach Ronnie, couldn't reach him because Ronnie had first told me about the program, right? When he took me to lunch up in Hollywood. That was in the end of '86. But I was able to reach Ralph and ask him to take the car back. And he insisted that I go up to the Harbor Light, and I didn't know what rehab was, even though Ronnie said that they stopped. I didn't know what that was. I had no idea, but I knew that I was tired. I had nowhere to go. I owed a bunch of people money. I knew I had problems, but the thought of quitting, that never, that's like as foreign as the thought of not breathing air. I never thought that was possible. So it just never entered my mind about totally quitting or anything, but I was going there so that I could rest up. They told me I could go there, get a bed, and I really needed a bed. I really needed to lay down. And that's why I went. Ralph basically said he wouldn't take the car back unless I went in the Harbor Light. That's why. So
Sound
That's
like
why.
Ralph did a lot of negotiating in order
I
to
wouldn't
help,
it was
help
a,
his, which I
it was a
wanted to,
short negotiation, Theresa. You know Ralph, it was real short.
some negotiation. Now, a lot of times we get sober, we have family members who are also drinking, and we go and find out about recovery. So let me ask you, Ralph, did you go, I have to bring this message back to my family and help my brothers? Did that happen for you, or just something that they saw and they wanted to do? Like, you know what I mean?
Yes, and I'm gonna tell you a secret. I've only shared it once, and I shared it since we've been on the Zoom platform. When I got sober for real, so I went in '85, relapsed. Christmas Eve, my brothers were at mom's house and they were drinking. I was at my house where I was getting divorced from, put a bike together for my daughter, thought we would spend Christmas Eve as a family. My then wife said, Ralph, I gotta go to bed. I'll see you tomorrow. Showed me to the door. I was crushed because I was thinking I'd be back. And I caught the bus back to mom's house, and my brothers were on the porch drinking gin and Rose's lime juice, Christmas Eve. And just like it says in the chapter, more about alcoholism, sometimes we deliberately set out to get drunk thinking circumstances warranted, and it says parallel with the sound reason, the insanely trivial idea. I'm lonely, I'm rejected. And so I drank and I stayed out until the following year. And so when I came back, I didn't care nothing about whether my family came back. I didn't care nothing about whether I got back in the house. I didn't care nothing about whether or not I was going to be what. I just was 33 and I was tired. I was not thinking about like Bill in the bed, maybe I could pass this message on. Wasn't thinking none of that. Wasn't thinking none of it. And then circumstances just had it that Ronnie went in, so when I went back, Ronnie had already been there. Now, when I went to get sober for real, Ronnie was in there already. And so when I got sober, here's the thing, team, to go back to what you said though. So Ronnie was the one that stayed sober first. Then I got sober, so it was me and Ronnie. But the thing about my brothers, Reggie went shortly after. And so I was at 9604, that was my home group. And me and Ronnie were down there. When Reggie came shortly after, that was kind of cool. When it was time for Rod, I didn't see AA the way I see AA now. I didn't see AA as this safe, and I didn't see you guys the way I see you. I almost didn't want Rod coming down to 96 because it was embarrassing. How could this many people from one family all be up in this room? And I'm selfish and I'm self-centered, and I'm thinking it makes me look bad. Because I didn't know up in here how we just embrace. And I still had the mentality I have from coming in from the street. How can all of y'all be that ragged? How can all of y'all be that toe up? How can wait a minute, it was you and Ronnie, then Reggie, you mean it's another one? And I didn't know it would one day be a thing where you guys would embrace this. Like, this is a miracle. I saw it as really embarrassing, So no, but the same token, when Rob was ready to, and he could tell that story, in November of 87, Rod was in the Harbor Light, and he had been in and out. Rod is the only one of us that have done time. Rod did time. He did a year. And me and Ronnie, we were in our first year of sobriety. Rod he did time. I pretended I didn't have a brother at that time. That's how I have to work with stuff. Because if I imagined him in there, it would crush me. And there was nothing I could do about it. So Rod gets out and he want to come to the house. Me and Ronnie saying, you can't come to the house. You got to go get into treatment. He got in the Harbor Light, was in there, and then he walked out off a $11 beneficiary check. So he calls in November of 86. It was cold that November in 86, you guys. And Rod called and said, can I come home? Me and Ronnie were staying at Mom's house. Mom deferred all recovery questions to me and Ronnie. Reggie, if Reggie had something, Rod, he called Mama and she put me on the phone.
That was 87, by the way.
And yeah, 87.
Yes.
And she put me on the phone. And Rob was like, man, I'm like, no, you can't come here. You can't come here. I said, you had somewhere to stay. What you mean you don't have nowhere to stay? You were staying somewhere. You were in Harbor Light. And he left Harbor Light with $10 in his pocket to go back and be big time dope dealer again on Skid Row, right? And so so I hung up the phone. It wasn't no star 69 at this time, you guys. See, I'm crying. Because my brother, all of us, we not stay on the street, guys, because we got them out. We don't live on the street. And so I'm thinking, Rod is on the street. I don't know where to get him. And I'm crying. I call Strange because I'm crying. Man, I need to roll out and try to go find my brother. Strange said, no, you don't. You did the right thing. God has got him. And so that's November. It was cold that November, you guys. And so then on Christmas Eve of 1987, Rod called again. And he said, man, can I just come home for Christmas? And I said, I'll be down there in the morning to get you. And we agreed where he would be downtown. I drove downtown and I didn't see him. And I drove around the block where he was supposed to be and I didn't see him. And I said, I'm gonna do it one more time. And apparently he had been there the whole time. He jumped in front of the car and I didn't recognize him. Rod, of all of us, has always been pretty boy. Stand in the mirror for like Rod standing in the mirror. Now, me and Ronnie Red, we dress. Rod is dressing his fat, but he take forever. He ironing, he preening it. But this guy that jumped in front of the car was filthy, nasty, caked. I'm crying. I don't recognize it. And he gets in my car, and I let the window down, and I stick my head out the car the whole time driving home. And that was Christmas morning of 1987, and my grandmother was still alive. We get to the back door of the house, and we coming in, and when Mom seen him at the back door, she buckled. She almost passed out. She buckled, and she said, "Don't let Mama," her mother, "don't let Mama see him." And we hustled him in the house, and he went in the bathtub. He can tell you the rest of that part of the story, but yeah.
Just
Which
fuck the
leads me-
bathtub up.
which leads me to ask the question of two things I'm interested in. Did anyone think they were better off than the other? Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't as bad as. Do you know what I mean? Did you ever go, man, if I ever get like Reggie,
No.
then, you know,
No.
did that occur to anyone?
Well,
Rob may have
it
thought
occurred
that
to me.
because Rob was the dope dealer. See, we were all customers.
No, but I thought Ronnie and Ralph were way worse than me. I thought
We got there
they were
first.
crazy.
We were.
They were doing. People look at them now, and you guys, like somebody said to me the other day, I'm not gonna name her name, but she said, "Oh yeah, you like me. You're a low bottom. You're not like Ronnie and Ralph were like." I said, "You really don't know them." I said, "You really don't know Ronnie and Ralph." I always kept a job. I would be, I was doing things a different way. That's why Ronnie and Ralph, I thought, I say that in my pitch about Ronnie, when Ronnie took me and Ronnie first introduced, he said about Harbor Light, and he said, "If you ever want to stop, I can get you in there too." I'm dead serious. When I said, I thought to myself, no, you were scandalous out there. You need to be up in there. Ralph and Ronnie were no joke. They were no joke out there. I'm telling you. And I always thought, if I get as bad as them, then I'll go in there. And I never thought I was bad as them until I had to try to come back. Then, that was different.
Oh yeah, you were bad then.
Oh yeah. Let me woo! So let me tell you something, Theresa. Reggie was always real sneaky. He was always real sneaky, right? Very quiet, very stealth, right? Me and Ralph were like the under. It's like, how you can have a bottom, and then we were like undercover bottom. We got really cut, right?
Undercover.
But let me just. I want to share this because Theresa, you asked the question about whether or not did we ever feel like we were better than one or the other, or how we looked at it. Ralph shared something about the way he felt about when Rod came in, about this embarrassment. And I don't know if I've ever shared this or if I've ever put it out there, but when Ralph called the Harbor Light, and I was there, I happened to be, would have little volunteer jobs there. One of the jobs I had was working in the section called Primary, which is where all the new people came in Harbor Light. And when Ralph called, somebody contacted me and said, "Hey man, your brother's calling trying to get in," right? And I was just ecstatic when they said that Ralph wanted to get in. And I said, I can get you a bed, right? And when he came in, first day that he had come in there, and we have like a dining hall where you could eat. Where you get, it's almost like cafeteria style where you get your food and stuff. And I'm sitting at a table with a couple of guys I had struck up a friendship with. I have like 88 days, and Ralph comes in. I've had no contact with my family during those first 88 days because I knew this last time, this was my third time around the block. I knew if I went home on a pass, if I did anything, if I had to cut off everybody for me to stay. So that's how desperate I wanted to stay sober. I knew I couldn't be in touch with anybody. And so this is my first contact with one of my family members. And when I saw Ralph came in, because all the guys in Primary were separate. everybody in primary were separate from everybody else, from all the guys who had been there for a while. And I see Ralph in the line getting something to eat. And you would have thought I would have felt happiness or joy or whatever. But when I looked at him, I can't even see. Y'all look at Ralph today, right? Ralph can put on a couple of elbows, right? You know, you should have seen us back in the day, right? You know, ooh, Ralph, man, he looked so emaciated, right? He just looked bad, right? And I felt embarrassed because that's my brother that I had grown up idolizing. He had always been the one ahead of me, the one was always the achiever. He was the leader in the family in terms of all that kind of stuff. And now I see him, and this is the first time. See, he probably looked like that when I was out there too, but it didn't look like that to me because that was like, but I'm 88 days sober and my whole perception has changed. And I see him and I don't even see him the same. I've never seen him like that. Right. And I almost wanted to turn away from him. I didn't even want to tell the guys at the table that that was my brother. And I felt ashamed of that. I felt ashamed of feeling ashamed. And that's such a trip, because I had not even reflected on that, in so long, and wow.
Which is interesting perspective, because from most of the stories that I've heard, you all ended up in your mother's house.
Mhm.
So none of you were sitting around in your mother's house drinking or using and looking at each other saying we all look pathetic living in our mother's house. Y'all all thought you were doing good. You just happened to be at your mother's house. Is that what I'm understanding? Until you get sober and then you're like, holy cow, we're messed up.
Well,
the alcoholic life seemed the only normal.
We
I
all knew
wasn't
we were
tripping
doing
off.
bad.
Oh, we tore up. We was like, we coming up. No, I wasn't tripping off. People in our community, we were cool. People wanted to hang out with us. We shared. We were fun guys. We were different than a lot of other guys. At different points, stuff would come. And Rod, of course, Rod was really so he was the baby brother, and in every other respect, at different times, we've all chastised him, but in the life, Rod had a status over us.
Yeah.
Which
So
is
he was our
a
baby.
question I wanted to ask Rod, which is, it sounded like you had a status as a dealer, so did you take that position of thinking that I'm better off than my brothers in their condition until it got really bad for you?
Yeah. It takes me to when I came back from San Diego, and my mom was on a trip, and my brothers were there, and all just in the house. And I came home, and I had this, I just got back, so I saw how bad they were doing, but they my brothers, and we still have some type of bond. So, so I get home and I'm like, okay. So I put them to work. And see, and that was always a dream of mine, because I always looked up to them. And I'm the black sheep coming up. They were that's just how it was, and I got home and now I'm the man of the family. I arrived. Mind you, I'm a closet smoker.
Right.
That they don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
So I get home, and when I gave them positions, okay, you're gonna be out here, you're gonna be outside, you're gonna bring them in, so I'm giving them duties. Rod giving my brothers duties. Oh man, that was amazing. And I don't know. I didn't know that, fast forward, and that they were out to get me later. My brother said, the disease is something else. So I woke up one morning and my pockets were inside out, and they were gone. And, they just, just left me to just die right there. They didn't beat me up or anything, but I didn't have anything, and they were gone.
Now let
that
me
was-
ask you. Each of you tell stories. There's a question I have been wanting to ask. When you listen to each other talk about what it was like, or even your experiences coming in and now, do you find, just like a little while ago, Rod, you're all like, no, that didn't happen. What do you do when your stories are different, when it's during the same time period? You have different experiences during the same time and same situation. How do you handle that? For example, I always say this. My brother would always say to me, that's not my experience. How do you guys respond when you hear each other's stories or comments and you don't remember it that way? How do you handle that with each other?
Well, Theresa, Ralph has always had the most endurance at arguing. So he said, me and Reggie pretty much, we just, okay, man, you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
At least they get to say you're right. I don't get to say anything. I just, especially when it comes to Ralph. Yeah.
Right. He's not gonna be wrong. So.
Yeah.
And he's just smiling, so at least
He
in
knows.
this case, he agrees.
He knows.
Now, did any of you, because most of the time, it sounds like each of you went to treatment, they usually propose like family groups coming in to treatment, if that's what happened. Did that happen for you? Did they suggest Al-Anon? Did any of you go to Al-Anon, your spouses? I wanted to ask that if people were married. How did the family begin, other than the four of you getting sober, did any other family members begin to join in the process of recovery as a result of your recovery?
No.
No, we all were in recovery. There was nobody left for Al-Anon.
We were all.
So like,
I was the only person that had a spouse, and
Right.
my spouse divorced me when I was in Cedar-Sinai before I came to stay. So when all of us, so none of us had spouses when we went into recovery. The significant other was my mom. My mom, who's never gone into Al-Anon or anything, but who's always had the spiritual basis. And my mom just embraced the program without going to Al-Anon, as many of you guys know. Opened up our house to a workshop in me and Ronnie's first year. And for some reason, and I hear a lot of stories, and then the other guys can say something, I hear a lot of stories about people taking a long time for families to get restored. And I guess we are just especially blessed because my mom let Ronnie and then me back in the house. We weren't 6 months old. Moms didn't even, she did. She embraced this. She never, I know she wanted us to go back to church first, but once she saw this was working, she just, that's, I hear a lot of people's story and I know that's not theirs. But
and you had children, right? Anyone who had children when they went into treatment? You. Did your children go to Alateen at all? Did you?
My daughter was 1.5.
Oh, okay.
My daughter doesn't even, she doesn't even know that guy. My daughter was 1.5, 2.5 when I got sober. She was 2 years old.
Very cool. And so now you're in treatment. Everyone seems to be getting sober, but as we heard, there was some relapses. When the relapse happened, did you feel compelled to go get Reggie? You know what I mean? We got to get him back in here. We got to go on a crusade. If anybody relapsed, did you go on a crusade to go get
wait, let me tell you about what Ralph's crusade. I relapsed, right? And there was a funeral of one family member, right? It was supposed to be, and I'm in the dope house, right? You know, and then Ralph come busted up in the dope house. Come on, Ronnie, get out of here, man. You are in here getting loaded. If you're gonna get loaded with somebody you know, not with all these strangers. So he came and rescued me from the dope house and took me to a motel. that's the rescuing that
As
happened.
far as it
No,
went.
but more than, no, so all that was pre. We have one relapse T since we've been in the program, which is what you're referring to.
Right.
And that's Reggie. And we were at, I don't know if Rod, I think you were there, but Ronnie, I don't know if you remember when we found out. 9604 was having an anniversary.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal. I think we were in tuxes and we were at this big dinner and they had a countdown. And at the countdown, Reggie stood up as the newest newcomer. And we hadn't experienced relapse. We hadn't experienced it in our circle. Our circle was, our circle included a lot of people. I think Lee is on here right now. And Lisa was, that's fam. We were together. And so Lee was there, Shelly, Strange. Our community was all at this table, at these tables. And I had not experienced it inside our circle. And it felt like I died. Remember, Ron? We would like, everybody was like a death. It was huge. It was, I can't even remember, Ron. Rob, were you there?
Yeah, I was there.
Everybody looked at each other and we were like, because at first when Reggie stood up, we were like, what is he doing?
Now, Reggie, was it difficult for you to stand up knowing that they didn't know and now you're going to let them know? Was it
It was
difficult
very
for you?
difficult. Incredibly difficult. It was probably the most difficult thing I've ever done, and for different reasons. But yeah.
Now, because of that, does that strengthen your participation in recovery? Now that you are all in it, does it help? Like knowing that if I go out and drink again, this can really affect my family. We're now a family of recovery. That's what it sounds like, right? You've become a family in recovery. The idea of drinking and using, does that, you know what I mean? Does that influence going back out? You follow what I'm saying? Does that influence you knowing that everyone in your family is in recovery? And if you drink and use, you now can no longer be a part of this family dynamic?
Are you,
Does that
are
occur
you
to you at all?
speaking to any particular person? Are you talking to Reggie this
Yeah,
time?
to any person. Yeah. Does that occur to you at all? The consequence of your drinking while you're still sane. Rob always looking like, what? While you're still sane, does that consequence occur to you that should I drink, I would be separated from this entire family dynamic of recovery?
No, I mean, it doesn't come to mind for me. I mean, because I don't think about drinking. I mean, I don't think about that. When I'm thinking about staying sober, it's not for my wife. It's not for Ralph or Reggie or what is it going to do. If I was going to think about what an impact it might have on somebody, it might be my mother or something like that. But shit, T, I don't, that's not the thought, because I just know, man, I don't know. I just think I'm gonna die if I get loaded. The family dynamic is not the motivating thing for me.
So you all seem to be in agreement, which solidifies there are a lot of people who come into recovery and want to stay sober for someone else. And what it shows that sometimes that doesn't work. Even though you're all in recovery, what's most important from what I'm hearing is that true from each of you. Wanting the desire to stay sober comes from you as an individual, not as a family group or for the family. Is that correct?
Well, Theresa, one thing that I'm very clear on, I never got loaded because of anybody else, and certainly not gonna get sober for anybody else. I always know where it came from.
And now I would like to ask you, your mother, I've heard the story that your mother is a very religious person, spiritual person. You grew up in that environment. Did any of you return to that, return to her church, became a church member? You know how we say these religious people are probably right, and some people return back to their religious family of origin. Did anyone return to the church or the message that your mother gave you the years growing up after getting sober?
No.
That's a big no.
Well, because one thing is that we started the workshop on Sunday mornings, and after being 1 year sober, we started the workshop during when we would be going to church, and I know it probably crushed my mother to think, because I know it may have been in her mind, I've got my boys back. They're talking about God. So the natural next step is they're going to be coming back to church. They're probably going to be pillars of the church. They're going to be this, that, and the other. And I hate speaking for my mother or anything in that way, but I can't imagine that she wasn't thinking that was going to happen. So for her to embrace us starting a workshop in her house on Sunday mornings, with her knowing that us being there meant we couldn't be there in the church. And so over the years, I know I have gone back to church services for my mother. There have been special ceremonies. She's asked us to speak at the church, to share our experiences of being sober, so that we could help young people who are at the church and either other people who may have been undercover at the church. She's referred people from the church to the workshop, to us, for them to get sober. So, I haven't had that experience of a person going back and rejoining the church or doing anything like that. You guys are the closest thing I have to that.
Yeah,
Anyone
and
want to
I
add
would
to that?
not be that dismissive of it. I especially because I had kids, and because we have a spiritual basis a lot. I believe people need a spiritual base a lot. I really believe that. I really believe in this pandemic, for instance, people really need connection, and I would hate. Sometimes we make the mistake of thinking we're special. We do this, ooh, those norm, as if that's some other group of people. And where do we think our principles came from? And so I think everybody, and so it was really important for me. I used to wrestle with that for a time, because my mom, growing up, we would always see people whose parents sent them to church, but they didn't go to church with them. I think there's that's a distinction. That's a do as I say, not as I do. But we never had that. My mom took us to church, and so I wrestled with that for a time, and that idea. Thank God, on their own, my kids, and I think Lee is still on here, and I know Lee and River were going, to the same church for a time later on, but just back to your question, T. I've been back. Now I hear different in church. I hear different. I always loved the emotional aspects of church. When they get to singing sometime, I don't know how many people on here might be Baptist or not. I know in some denominations, it's majestic kind of singing, hymns and the rest. But in Baptist churches, it's emotional, and I would be moved to tears sometime, and you get that feeling. And but I I have not, but the short answer, T, and I know it for all of us, none of us have been moved to go back as church members. But I've been in churches, and I get something different now.
And then, so do all of you have the same home group? Did you all end up at 9604 and that became your home group? Or did you all found different meetings and attended meetings separately?
We all started 96. That was it. When Reggie first came, he was the secretary at the 3:30. When Robbie gave Rod that $5, I took him in. He remembers, and see, I have a different memory. And I guess what stuck for him is not what stuck when I took him. And I think maybe that's when Reggie said he might have took him the second time, and he remembers Malcolm. When I took him to 96, I introduced him to Carl P. And because Carl P really, I thought that he reminded me of Rod. So yeah, all of us started in 96.
And Malcolm was my first sponsor, actually. And yeah, I did introduce Rod there. And yeah, I did pay Rod to go to a meeting as well.
And
Unlike
yeah, Rod.
Yes, unlike the other three brothers, 96 is my new neighborhood. See, my other brothers, they have a life. Now with me, I'm there all the time. In between anything, if I'm not doing anything for taking care of business, working, taking care of any serious business, that's where I hang out. My brothers knew that it would be hard for me. They knew I would be the hardest one to get off the block that I used to live on. So 9604 is the new block. It's kind of like they knew that I really needed to be there as far as hanging out, and so I'm there. I'm the representative, the other three, they do drive-bys every now and then, but I'm there almost 24/7,
Yeah.
9604.
And Rod, talk a little bit more about that. You're there all the time.
All the
What are
time.
some of the things that you do other than the meetings? What do you do in between meetings?
In
Helping
between
newcomers?
meetings, it's dominoes, cards, a lot of new people that come through there. They're able to sit and get to find some new friends to hang out with. We encourage them to hang out and make this your new hangout spot. Opposed to where you're going back to. It works for it's a host of us that hang out there all the time, and it's just and this is my first time on Zoom. This is my first time on Zoom. You see, I couldn't even push the mute button. And I'm saying that to say that all through the pandemic, they had to put a gate up because they had kind of like closed down 9604 through this pandemic. We started meetings in the hour, because it's some of us that need live heads, and I'm a live type of guy. My brothers know that I'm really the street one. Out of all of us, I'm really the street guy, and that hasn't changed. So yeah, so it's been we've hosted meetings outside the gate, and until they opened it back up, all back up. And so it's 9604, man. It's my home. It's my neighborhood. It's where I hang out.
Nice. And how do I want to ask this? Do you stay out of each other's recovery process, or do you get involved? See what I mean by this. Because you're all pretty much aware of recovery, do you say things like, I'm calling your sponsor if you don't? You need to write an inventory? When's the last time you went to a meeting? Do you get involved in each other's recovery that way? Or do you mind your own business?
I wish I could just answer this. I'll be the first one to answer this. One, I thank God that my brothers, they know I'm a little different. So, and they don't bother me. They just so happy to see me wanting to be, in the fellowship. So, but one time, Ralph knew something was wrong with me. I was in my first relationship, being sober, and being in that relationship, the girlfriend, you know how they'll try to tell you what you need to be doing, and you need to be writing, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I thank God for Ralph, because one day I came home and he knew something was wrong when I had a notebook in my hand. He just knew that, Rod. He said, like, what's going on with you? What are you doing with this? And I said, my girl think that I need. And he said, come on, man. Just keep doing what you're doing, man. Don't get discouraged, and just use your support that you got. Don't let the girlfriend deter you, man. you know, and that was, man, I needed that more than anything. I mean, on this journey, that was the only time he said anything to me or gave me any encouragement about what he had seen different in me, despite what I was doing before, you know?
Anyone else? You get involved in each other's recovery, behavior, you know what I mean? I'm gonna tell your sponsor, you need to cut that out. That doesn't follow our program of action.
We
Well,
never been like that as guys. Nowhere in life, period. Are we like that? Number one, everybody hard-headed. Somebody gonna tell somebody. Well, I don't know. It never would even come up. We ain't never in school. Hey man, have you done your home? And in recovery, no, we've never ever done that. We not built that way as guys.
So what do you do with the stuff that you see though? Because I'm sure that you see things that may appear to you as concerning, meaning you see one of them not going to meetings or working any steps, or you ain't seen them at the 9604 in a while. You know how we can tell when people slowly, you know what I mean? It appears as though they're starting to pull away from the program of recovery or behavior. What do you do with that? You just talk to your sponsor, your inventory. How do you deal with that?
I've never seen that. I know when you say that, you say we see. I don't know. When Reggie relapsed, then when everybody looked back, we were able to say, oh, Reggie had stopped coming to work. He would be locked up in the room. But for real, I don't know I don't. Reggie looked like he had something different, but
well, not really different. See, Theresa, one of the things that is interesting to note is we do respect each other and definitely stay out of that area for the most part. Ralph famously stepped into that area once, like way later on when it was real bad for me.
yeah, not in your recovery. You certainly wasn't in recovery.
Well, in my lack of recovery, he stepped up with anyway, that was a whole nother issue, but no, it's funny. The dynamic is different. It's kind of real different because Ronnie and Ralph have always been thick as thieves, right? That was before recovery. And then once we got into recovery, like sometimes, like when you hear them talk, you would think that I wasn't in that first workshop, right? Or the first subsequent one. They always will say that we were in there, like they'll say, yeah, me and Ralph or Ronnie or me and Ronnie. And yes, they definitely, those two and Strange started it, but believe that everybody in there was a big part. And then I kind of like, I always would do my own thing. Those two and Strange were running together. I would be with like Michael Oliver and Johnny, and we would be going to prisons and doing different things. And I just had a whole different set of people within AA, and me and Jimmy Puckett came in together, my buddy, and it was just a whole different thing. And everybody just stayed out of it. It wasn't like stayed out of each other's way. There was just everybody respected each other. And we just did what we do. Now, at one time, I'll talk about that because Ralph talks about it sometime when he saw me at the house and confronted me and was ready to jump on me. And he was hot. And I looked at him and it was just crazy. And I did say to him, oh, they had a really great 12-step call. And that's when he realized what he was doing and just walked off. But that was it. Other than that, nobody's ever said anything. And actually, I'll say this, which I've never said to any of them before. I wish after Angie died, I almost really wish somebody had come and said something a little bit more. Because I lasted I had a long period, and I lasted a long time after she died, but I was always away from everybody because I was working different and living in a different place. And I kind of wish, and that kind of determines how I handle things today. Like I remember there was a couple of people at the workshop who didn't want to get on Zoom, and I stayed on them, because I remember I wish somebody had always put their hand out to me. Not maybe pushing, but just let me know that that hand was out there, but we've always given each other respect. And it's almost like, it felt like people were treating me like it was walking on eggshells and they didn't want to say anything. And it always felt kind of bad, that nobody would ever talk about anything.
Have anything, Ronnie?
So, well, I was just thinking as they were talking and stuff, because it's kind of almost been like the family dynamic as we grew up and stuff, kind of being both as a family unit, but also as discrete people, individuals, and staying out of each other's shit, right? Staying out of each other's business, and that can cut a couple of ways. Because I know when somebody's new, like a couple of things, like with Rod, when Rod was brand new, I knew that Rod was getting kicked out of one of his first programs because they said he had a dirty test, right? And Rod was really mad, really resentful. And I knew that, I had to talk to him. We talked to him about not letting that make him get loaded, right? Because I said, if he knew he hadn't done anything, and still in the back of my mind, you always thinking, well, are you really lying? They said you tested. But the reason I knew Rod instantly got into, was it Harbor Light, Rod? That
Yes.
You went from the castle to Harbor Light? That
Yes.
Rod went directly from the program that said he was dirty to another program. And I knew then that he wanted to stay sober. Now, my participation in that was only that I supported him and didn't express outward doubt about him being honest with us, about when he was saying about how he hadn't done that. Rod asked me later when I got a call from him, and Rod had gotten picked up coming from 9604. He got stopped by the police, and they picked him up, and he had a warrant for a probation violation or something.
Yes.
He was supposed to have been reporting in San Diego or somewhere and hadn't been doing it. And Rob was looking at going to prison sober. How much time did you have then, Rob?
I had a year and a half.
Right.
A year and a half sober.
Getting ready to go to prison, right? On a humbug, on living sober, but then thinking, I don't have to go back there and and do whatever. And he involved me in his life in that way, right? Because I could help him with using my license then. And when you talking about people rallying, behind my brother so that he wouldn't have to go to prison. That being able to be involved in our brothers' life, in each other's lives, not only as invited in, maybe not trying to insert my way in, but being invited in to help. That's the only way it's really gone to, because I know, man, this whole family dynamic that we got going on here, man, from all the way back when we were little, when we used to make Rod go ask mama if we could have vanilla wafers for dessert, right? Because we'd always get the baby.
Right.
Go, always. It's been a trip dynamic.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is we read in the family afterwards. Most of our literature talks about, even to the wives, or even throughout the big book, as when we're about to make amends, right? When do we include the family? When do we approach them? Do you know what I mean? Do we invite them in for meditation and prayer? When it comes time to many family members not understanding us doing step 9, I guess the question would be, if you have most family members in recovery, does that process easier? Is that process easier, or is it just the same as family members who are not in recovery and don't know anything about it? Is it easier having family members in recovery to recover together?
We don't have a frame of reference, because all I know is it's easy. Yes, it's easy for us, but I don't know if it's, I it's, so I would assume it is, because as our family, as opposed to, I guess, another family, all of us know and appreciate when somebody, what amends are. All of us know and appreciate the importance of meetings. So nobody would ever sweat somebody. And it permeates out to the people in the family that's not even, because so many members of the family are. All our kids know, they don't trip. Everybody knows. We ended up with extended so our family on holidays and Christmases, it would be such a big deal that not only our family, our extended family, and then friends of family, and so it would be these like giant meetings on holidays. It would be like gigantic meetings. And we have so many members of the fellowship. If they didn't have a place to go, or if they didn't know somebody, they came to our house for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
And so now that you've gotten in recovery, you begin to have relationships, marriages. Did you marry any of your spouses are in recovery, or anyone that are not in recovery? Who's married, and did your spouses, were they in recovery or not?
We only got one person married.
I'm the one married. I'm the one.
No, we have people who were married.
Who were married.
Which one you want to talk to first?
Yeah.
So Ronnie, is your spouse, you're married currently, is your spouse in recovery, or what we can call normie?
No, she's not in recovery. I don't know what normal is. let me make sure she can hear me.
And does she attend Al-Anon?
No, because when I met her, I was already sober. She does not have any kind of experience with me getting loaded. I met her as a secretary in the public defender's office. Nice. And so it's an interesting dynamic, because my wife's family are all Jehovah's Witnesses. And so Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate holidays such as Christmas and other kinds of holidays. So it's early in my sobriety, my wife was not as devoutly practicing. So we would go to the family house for Christmases and holidays and different things like that. And our kids and stuff would be there. And now that she's become more involved in her fellowship, now they don't celebrate. They can't go over the house and celebrate, because that would go against their practices and stuff. So it's just an interesting dynamic for me. But she knows, she's traveled to all the conventions with me, but very supportive of me being in the fellowship and stuff. But I've had some interesting things over the years as it's developed to make sure that I have to practice the principles in all my affairs, because I started getting kind of really not right-sized in my relationship, in my marriage, as I was in the fellowship. And so it's been really an interesting thing to make sure that I do that, because definitely best believe I get it pointed in my face. Hey, look, you talk that talk about what you're doing there and stuff, practice that thing here. So I just, it's very interesting.
And would you say the family now afterwards, since you've been implementing these principles in your life for so many years, it's changed the generations in the family to come? Your children, those who have children speak this language? Family members, does this become the language and the way of life? Where before, when you talk about what it was like, mom is going to church, you guys are all getting loaded and you were achievers and all that changed. Now is the language of recovery the way of life for you and all of your family? Is that contagious?
Look at those.
Oh, I love that I leave you guys speechless.
I was waiting to see who was going first.
Yeah. Well, actually, no. And see, I met my wife, my ex-wife now. We met together while we were both in recovery. And but throughout all our families, we really kept that separate. It's not separate, but it is separate. Nobody's heavy-handed about the fellowship. Nobody has to be. It's understood, at least as far as I am, and as far as I know, it's not like really having the recovery talk within the family, at least in my family, maybe at my side. I'll let everybody else speak for themselves.
I want to ask a
Well,
couple things. I'm gonna give you guys a couple of minutes to wrap up and share stuff we didn't cover. But yeah, is there anybody who's more rigid? Is anybody more rigid with the program of recovery amongst all of you? Reggie's smiling. He got an answer. He's gonna let them speak for themselves.
Let them speak for themselves.
But T, I don't know what you mean by more rigid.
More, you know, how they call big book thumpers, more, you know what I mean, more rigid of the program is like this and you must do the program, and or is everybody just, you know what I mean? Is anybody more rigid?
Well, so look, Rod kind of answered this in a particular way, that Rod's dynamic in terms of his approach to the program is different than ours, where we're more book oriented and he's more action oriented, more activities oriented, more with a lot of that. Because I used to think, well, I want Rod to be in the workshop. Rod would be sleeping in the bedroom. We'd be having a workshop here and I'd be wanting him to get out of there. And Rod's sober. Rod's sober. He's happy. He ain't breaking the law. He's doing. And so a lot of times I had to look at, and Rod has probably changed more than any of it. You see me, Ralph, and Reggie sitting up here. Rod has probably changed more in terms of, the way he lives versus the way he used to live than any of us, right? And by his example of what he does, and I hear new people talk about the effect that Rod has on them, and it's like we all speak to somebody. Where I think all of us in these squares, if we have to be ourselves and be our best selves, and it speaks to somebody. I know this is way off your question, probably, Theresa, but it's what struck me when you were talking about is somebody more rigid than not. I thank God that we don't try to make Rod be somebody other than who he is. And
I don't see any of us as rigid at all either. I mean, people, I think what people have is an expectation. When you think about, oh God, people who are in a work, doing this work and in this book and in this, well, if you know me, I chafe at rigidity. I chafe at doctrine and dogma. That is something that I don't think spiritual is one size fits all. When you ask that question, T, about do you think as a result of being in recovery, have our offspring been, I think they can't help but because of the way we live our lives. But I don't know that they've been fed a whole lot different than we were fed from my mama. And I don't know that because it wasn't lack of information, instruction, discipline, or example. We just have that thing that's different. But my daughters, at least in my house, and my son, I think they've been influenced by years of consistency. And the difference too is they've had a man presence, which we didn't. They've had a man presence since which none of us sitting here. Well, we did have a guy that entered our lives. You guys don't hear us talk about him. And he was very much influential. He came in at a time when my mom was single and he took on a lady who had 6 sons. He was a remarkable man. So he was an example for us.
Is there any misconception? A lot of people know, many of you, Rod is the quiet one, but he does a whole lot behind the scenes and being of service. 12-step calls. He's a quiet one with regards to being public. I was laughing. You guys are speaking and people hear a lot of you. But would you say there's any misconception of what people say about the White brothers? Is there anything you could think of that's a misconception of the White brothers
I think
that
so.
you've heard?
I think so. I think that people really believe things about Ralph and Ronnie that aren't true. And it's the it's the transformation deal. No, when I say that, I say it as a compliment. They really they can't tell how far these guys came from. They really can. And they look there and they put on, it seems like, and they would deny this, but people look at them and put them in a certain area as if they've never done certain things or they didn't come from, people don't understand how much they've come from the same place that that where they are now, where these people are now. And if they knew that and would understand, like with all three of them, the thing that people can't appreciate is how good of people they are away from the podium, away from these Zoom squares, away from where you see them always in positions of responsibility. And people, what they see with Rod is what they get. So people, that's why I leave Rod out of that part of it, but I'm not saying he's any less as good a person as them, but people don't understand how far these guys have come from to be who they are and just how good they are even outside of the square.
Rod, you have
Yes.
most of your other brothers who tend to be in the public light, right? Right,
Yes.
they tend to be out there. And I'm sure, and I'm gonna make an assumption that you don't see yourself less than or better than, right? Do you see your role hanging out at 9604, meeting the newcomer in the trenches, just as significant as those who are out there in the limelight in the public? And I ask that question because sometimes there's a lot of people who believe that I need to be that in order to be doing something in AA. I think Ralph uses the term silent, what do you call that? Silent warrior?
Shadow soldiers.
I get that all wrong. Shadows, I can't say it. I think it's a shadow soldiers. It's a tongue twister. I can't say it. Shadow, too many S's. Whatever Ralph said, like that. Do you see yourself like that? Just as powerful and significant of what people see folks in public.
Rob, before you answer that question, tell Theresa what your nickname is.
Famous. And they're laughing. And it's a good one because that name came from me coming from a program from the Harbor Light one of those times, one of those times before I got it. I came back and Ralph and Ronald and Reggie were like famous. Everybody talked about it all the time. And so I was on their coattails, and it was like that nobody knew me yet. So it was like, I'm one of the famous white brothers. I'm one of the famous white brothers. Don't call me to share. Don't do any of that stuff, but I am one of the famous white brothers. And I relapsed after that. So
famous in an anonymous program.
One of the in-laws, Lisa's sister Shelly. Once we were back in the workshop once again, she just remembered that. She remembered, me doing that before I relapsed and shit. So she was like, famous, and somebody else heard her say it. So other people started calling me famous. And then once again, I guess I had enough time where I felt confident enough to start saying, yeah, I'm famous. I'm an alcoholic. So at any rate though, Ronald, his girlfriend at the time gave me a shot at working at a recovery home, and I only had like a year and a half sober. And from then on, I was working with others. I was working with others all the time. After the clock, after 11 o'clock, a couple of clients would see me after I get off work, and I would spend hours with them after getting off. So I just kind of like, that went on until this day. It's just like I love being around people. There's suffer from what I suffer from, and I'm just in the trenches, man. I love spending time one alcoholic talking to another. That's been working for me, man, more than anything since I've been here. When
So Theresa, oh, go on, Rob.
so that has gotten me to a place where I'm different from my brothers, but I feel like I'm right there with them. I just feel, and that's a certain feeling I've got. I've arrived, I'm there with them, because I've always been the black sheep. Now, I feel that I'm giving just as much as them, it's just in a different way.
Now
So
you famous.
Theresa, yes.
So I feel
you were
famous.
talking about Rod is quiet. He ain't. We were at my mother's house, and he was like 6 months or something. And we were sitting, and I overheard him talking to a guy that was new, kind of a hard guy, street guy. And I overheard Rod talking to this guy. And I was like, wow. And so Ginger, who was over the way back in at the over Pacifica House at the time, Ginger was looking for somebody. And I remember telling Ginger, I think that Rod might be good, but it was 2 turning points. I don't know if we got people that's new sitting on here right now too. And there are some markers in recovery that to me are like, when you look at them, you can see them. The first one with Rod was when he took a job working on the door at Kmart.
Mm,
He was working on the door at Kmart.
right.
Now, Rod, when he got sober, his boys, because Rod knew some people that were in the life, and his boys knew he was sober and said, oh, you could work again. Because Rod, when Theresa said this, God has transformed of all of us. Rod always had more game, more people love to come. Rod would give them conversation forever. He in that life. And so so when he took, and his boys were coming at him. He used to share that with, they were coming at him hard. And he was new. And when he took that job at Kmart, because Rod never did minimum wage.
Never.
Rod always was come up because he could come up. Rod never did minimum wage, never did a regular real job. And when he took that job, I said, damn, he want to be sober. I remember thinking to myself, seminal. Then when I told Ginger about that, because I heard him talking to this dude that was new. Rod can talk to people me, Ronnie, and Reggie can't talk to. He got a constituency and he's got a message. And so when I look at this, when you guys talk about being rigid, he's helped me more. We do the workshop and I'm convinced, have measures available. I'm convinced doing everything. I'm also convinced in the spiritual realm, God do what he do. He do what he do. And though Rod is not writing like we write, Rod has done more humility stuff than me, Ronnie, and Reggie put together. Because Rod could hear the lick. When his boys were coming at him, he voluntarily, because this was so important to him. And now he's got this thing with his daughter. Been a deadbeat dad. I'm gonna put his business out there. He got some other kids. I don't even know who they are. Been a deadbeat, that and rest, and got forced into being a single father. And went to court, did the whole custody thing, was scared. And the fellowship told him, dude, you ain't raising her by yourself. And my family, we got a family that's a village. Rob, why are you tripping? And he took a chance. And it may not mean nothing to you guys, but me and my brother, we know my baby brother. And he's a father, and he's a great dad. He's a great dad. So when you talk about rigidity, no, spiritual world is broad, roomy, inclusive, and that includes all the ways these principles express themselves. Rod said something today that I had never even thought about, that the work that gets put in. You know, people call them, and sometimes I use AA bums, just hanging out at the club. You know, they just up there, they ain't got no jobs. And one day, this guy that had relapsed that I knew, and he was from Oklahoma, and he came to Los Angeles, and he wanted to meet with Toon and me, but it was 3:00. There wasn't no meeting going on. But we sent him in the 96 because we knew somebody was there. We knew somebody was there. And that's that crew.
Awesome. Got a few minutes. I want to ask a couple of specific questions with regards to, are there any old timers, mentors, sponsors that you've had? If you can name at least 3 of them, and then at least from one of them, something specific that you've, oh wait, how did I word it? Can you briefly state in a way that they influenced your recovery, a phrase, a mantra? Top 3 old timers you look up to. Is there one of them in particular, phrase or mantra? Something you learn from them that you just carry on through your recovery?
My God. Let me go first. I'll say there's my first sponsor's name was Clarence Barber. My second one was Jerome Scott. And then there was a lady that would always share that I mean Virginia. What was Virginia's last name, Ralph?
Virginia Thomas.
Virginia Thomas. Now, Clarence wasn't a very articulate guy, but Clarence was real down home, and Clarence would get up to the podium and he had a certain sincerity and genuineness about him that I loved. He was the first guy out in the parking lot that when I had asked him to be my sponsor, he asked me to go, and we sat in his car and he said, we're going to pray. And he asked me to hold his hands. And I need to let you know, I can't tell you the fear that gripped me when I was thinking about holding this guy's hand, sitting in the car in the parking lot, wondering who might walk by and see us. See these two, right? Yeah, because I'm new and I don't know about the intimacy. See, that's intimacy. And that's trust. And that's, see, this is a guy that demonstrated to me something I needed to have just shown to me. And that made an impact on me. So I don't want to I could say something about the other 2, but I'll pass it on.
Yeah, just tell us three of them and then one, something from one of them. How about you, Reggie?
Well, there's a couple of things that stand out to me. It was one, when it was early in sobriety and I was at 96,040 and all the time. And I was taking on a lot of stuff because I really wanted this thing. And I had a panel at Harbor Light that I got in the panel, and I had one of those nights. And I remember one time, and I was so scared, but I asked Herb King to come share at that panel. And Herb King told me yes. You know, and to me, I'm just a new guy. I'm a brand new guy. And Herb King got, I don't remember how many years he had at that time, but it was a whole gang of years, 40, whatever it was. And he came out and he shared at Harbor Light, just like he always shared, the same as he shared everywhere. And to me, that was huge, that a guy who was such an old timer would come out to a recovery home and just share because I asked him. And that was huge. And the one thing that somebody said to me, Rico Cruz, who's my sponsor now, one of the things he's always said to me, because people will ask me stuff, and sometimes I would want to go to Ralph or Ronnie or go to Rico, you know, somebody who I knew had all the answers, right? That's the way I always looked at it. And Rico said, no. He said, Reggie, if anybody ever asks you anything, they saw something in you that they believed in, and you give them the best Reggie White that you possibly have. He said, God didn't bring you here for you to push him off on somebody else. He said, and it made me believe in myself, you know, and be able to trust the God in me.
Rod?
Well, I haven't had too much success with sponsorship. Just names only. You know, I've always been one that kind of like someone that shared real good, like Jerome Scott, you know, and that kind of deal. And, you know, and I've been so unsuccessful with it that they would go up, I would go up to a podium and I share, and then they call them up to share on my birthday or something, and then they'll flip me a quarter when we were using quarters to make phone calls. They would flip me a quarter and tell me to call. You know, like, you know, so I never really used them, but I can say that this sounds corny as hell, but my 3 brothers have given me more sponsorship in my 34 years being sober you could ever imagine. You know, they've all 3 of them have done certain things at different times. You know, and it is man, and it always happened at the times I really needed it. And I'm really grateful because we've always been a close family. Close family, you know. As you see, we all got loaded. But yeah, my 3 brothers. That sounds corny as hell, but
Is there one thing? Is there one thing, a phrase or a mantra, something that's been said that you hold on to? You know, like that nugget that you carry around.
Don't drink and use, no matter what.
That's Thank you, Ralph. Give us a minute or 2 on that. So I got a couple of the juicy ones before we wrap it up.
Okay. I've had a zillion mentors. You know, my first sponsor was Bob Hunt. And if you were in a meeting with Bob Hunt, he would say, shh, and it would get real quiet. And then he would say, you hear that? That's God. And everybody knew that was Bob Hunt. He would say that and burn into the consciousness of everyone. That was Bob Hunt. My current sponsor, Bob Bazance. And Bob has so many things I hang on to. Life is lived forward, understood back. Bob says, I'm not the pipe. I'm not the well. I'm the pipe. I'm not the source. I'm just a channel. He always says that. Know when to get off the donkey route. What does that mean? But he's got so many things, you know, that Bob Bazan shares. And then there's one other guy. T, you made him known here. Ronnie knows him, John Davis. And he was a photographer, oh God. And John Davis saw me in a meeting one time, and we had a long conversation. The end of that conversation ended with him saying, Ralph, God gave us something he didn't even keep for himself. I said, what was that, John? He said, he gave us the choice over whether or not we're going to return his love. God is love. God don't have no choice. And I've always thought, wow. So, and I could go on and talk about Bob there. I mean, Polly Pistol, Virginia, just a zillion people have left me with stuff, but I'll stop.
Thank you. Couple of biggie questions we want to make sure that we get a chance to ask you, and that is, I don't like any of these.
Out of 52, you got a favorite.
No, because I narrowed down to 52. The truth of the matter is, y'all don't know it. I smoothly did this in a way that I'm pretty impressed. I'm just gonna say myself that I was able to ask what I wanted to ask. I think I did more than 9 questions though, but somebody shot me, but I'm like, it ain't flowing for me, but whatever. Is there any of your biggest regrets? Do you have any big regrets? Are there any regrets? We don't regret the past, no wish to shut the door on it, but do we actually have some regrets? And I'm gonna name another one. And then the hardest amends. Has there been the hardest amends that you've had to make? regret.
No
that-
regrets, no regrets for me, because we wouldn't be sitting here right now if I had done everything that happened. Hardest amends, amends to my wife.
Rod, any regrets?
Regrets. No regrets. Hardest of it is my mom.
Hmm. Ralph, how about you?
Couple of regrets. One of them is connected to my hardest amends, which is not really fair to say it because I didn't get to make it. I took some money from my grandmother, and and my grandmother died before I could make amends. And the regret is I could have made the amends before she died. I could have made the amends before she died. You know, that's why you guys, this 12-step journey is really, you know, even sober. That's why we have 10 steps and why we can keep on getting another opportunity, because stuff still goes on. We don't rise above human, you know. And another regret I regretted, I had never wanted River to have to grow up outside of her natural family. And when me and Lee broke up and she had to, that's something I regretted. When I got out that car, I mean, I let her out of that car. And this is a story that a lot of people are like, this is a truncated story. What is he talking about? But when my daughter had to get out of the car to go stay with her godparents, and when I closed that door and she stood on that porch and the door closed, I remember sitting in my car crying for 45 minutes, thinking I failed in recovery. When it talks about we will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it, the past as the past, but incidents in the past, yeah, yeah, yeah. Who wouldn't say they regret it, you know, almost killing their mom? Who wouldn't say that, you know? It's incidents, but the past itself, no. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the
Reggie?
hardest amends,
Oh,
like I said, was the one I didn't make to my grandmother. She died.
Reggie? Any regrets and the hardest amends you've had to make?
Many regrets, but the biggest one probably is that I didn't do better after Auntie died, as far as trying to do better for my wife and my son, and like trying to keep the family together, standing up, like just being a better man and a better dad in that situation. And I just totally was checked out. And the amends kind of falls into that because I haven't made amends to my son yet. And I know I don't even talk about him. And that's another thing. And that's part of the amends thing. And I reached out to him this week, and he's in San Diego working. And when he comes back, I'm finally going to do this amends. And I'm scared to death, you know, and that's one of the biggest regrets, that I've taken this long on that amends.
Thank you. So I just want to give you each at least 2 minutes, if you can, to just talk about, give you 2 minutes to just share anything you didn't get opportunity to share, something that maybe came to your heart in this discussion, in this interview, and that you like to leave us with. Hopefully something that can also help other families, whether they have other members in recovery or not. But people can walk away knowing what is the journey of a family that recovers together. Couple minutes. I'm gonna start with Reggie.
Just a couple of minutes. Any story to me that includes the four of us is kind of incomplete without including Mom and then my other two brothers, Will and Rick. I always talk about Rick because he's like left out of it. And to me, he's like the best person that I know. And he's like they talked about stealing his check and with the R white on there. And it was just whoever got to the mailbox first got the checks with the R white on it. I got too many of them to count. And they played, Will and Rick and Mom play such a huge role in all of this. And I wouldn't be here without these three and without those three, you know, equally, you know, and thank God for I'm so glad. Thank God that we're the family that we are so close. And from talking to all of you guys, I have really learned to appreciate the family that I have.
You, Rod?
Yeah, I'm just real grateful to be sitting here right now with three brothers, man. I guess this haven't happened in 30 years. Us four together in this recovery thing. You know, I was real scared. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it, but I'm just so grateful just to hear their stories and just hear everything I've heard. Just grateful, just real grateful. Thank you.
Is there any suggestion that you can give people with regards to their family journey and recovery? Anything you can suggest that people can do within their families?
Well, just keep praying. Keep praying. God does wonders, man. Yeah. And I'm only saying that because of Reggie. This last journey we had with him coming back. To just sit here now and to see us four sitting up here. Reggie is just amazing. He just come a long way, man. And just my suggestion: just don't give up. Don't give up and stay in prayer, man. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you. Ronnie.
I really don't have a lot. I love what Reggie and Rod said, especially Reggie including our other family members, because we don't, just because they're not in recovery, we don't talk about them a lot, except, Ricky, man, Ricky wasn't nearly as bad as all us. He just got loaded with us because he wanted to be with his brothers and stuff. And when we stopped, Ricky will have a drink, Ricky will do whatever, but Ricky ain't nothing like us, right? Ricky didn't need no meat, so whatever. Biggest heart in the world and stuff. And my brother Will, boy, you talking about a big brother who had traveled his own road and stuff. And man, I love my big brother. Has gone on cruises with us, has been back here, but he celebrates our recovery with us. Great guy. So I'm just glad to be here. And I guess I don't want to ever take for granted this miracle, the miracle of me and my brothers, because I can remember how bad we had gotten. See, and how real bad we had gotten. And Reggie was the reminder of that. After he had gone out and we saw his struggles to come back in and out. And I guess Rod kind of said, just pray. Because there was nothing, it was almost like he's so close yet so far at the time. And I know there's nothing that I could do other than be an example, be present, be here for him when he got back, if he was going to get back, and just pray that God would do for him what he couldn't do for himself. And that well-whooped ass would finally propel him in here, because he was getting that ass whooped too. It was still wasn't coming. It was like, what the heck? He had to get that. So anyway, I'm sorry. I digress.
Thank you.
I would echo what everybody else said. And especially when you talk about a message to people, one of the messages is, if for people who might have family, The only thing that I think we successfully did is be sure that if the time comes when they get here, you make it attractive for them when they get here. I'm so glad that by the time when Reggie's ass got whooped enough, that when he did come, his brothers were all knee deep in this deal. We're all entrenched in it. You know, don't get caught up in the waiting that when they get here, what are you gonna be like? And the other piece, you guys, we are appreciative. We're appreciative of this forum right here. And we're appreciative that people um, reach out and seem to think that there's something that we have to offer, but we ain't special, guys. I mean, we ain't specialer. Everybody in these squares, I think, is special, but you ain't unique. Everything in everybody in this square, I think, you know, God's got, you know, your face on his refrigerator. I believe that, you know, but sometimes people get caught up. Well, thank the white, we guys, you know what I mean? Trying to do this deal as best we can. When Theresa asked that question about misperception, I think that's one of the biggest misperceptions, that they are like doing something different or special. No, no. But we are grateful that you guys have embraced us to the extent that you wanted to hear from us today. You know, we're grateful. And that's pretty much it, T.
Thank you. I believe that I want to re-quote the last sentence of the first paragraph that we read, because you guys were a demonstration of that, I believe, for us today in this interview. And that is that we grow by our willingness to face and rectify errors and convert them into assets. And the alcoholic's past thus become the principal asset of the family. And frequently it is almost the only one. That was re-quoting Henry Ford from the family afterwards. And I think you guys demonstrated that through your answers, your participation. I want to thank you for being here. I'm sure later I'm going to be like, oh man, I didn't do that. I didn't ask that, but it's all good. God was in charge. My intention, I hope I was able to show all those who were here that the white brothers are alcoholics, just like you and I. Even though they may appear to come as a group, they're individual men who are striving for this process and program of recovery one day at a time, and are willing to carry the message any way possible, whether it's hanging out there 9604 in the alley, or doing the big book study Sunday morning, or speaking at a podium, or sending all those messages, being the town choir or crier, whatever you call it, letting us know where we can all find the program of recovery. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming here and answering the questions. And I will now turn the meeting over to, I think I'm supposed to be turning it over to Chris.